Hello, this is Roland. Welcome. Today I would like to talk a little bit about contemplation and about Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, and bring what they had to say up to the present. Talk about it in contemporary language. You know, these true mystics, they found something. What did they find? They found how to live in reality. Let me say that again. They found out how to live in reality. Most people spend most of their time lost in their imagination, which I've said many times, lost between their two ears, daydreaming, thinking about the past, worrying about the future, planning, scheming, lost. And not to mention worries. See, first we plan what great things we're going to do, or what we're going to say, or how we're going to get even, or how we're going to throw it in their face, or how we're going to prove something, or how we're going to have all this greatness and excitement and pleasure and success. See, we're always anticipating the future instead of living in the moment. But then what happens is, because we're not living in reality, we're living in a dream world. And who's in charge of this dream world? Have you ever stopped to wonder why you get all these goals and ambitious schemes? Where does all that come from? It comes from the outside. People, ideas that people gave you, suggestions that they made, teases, taunts, challenges. See, they came from somewhere. That's where they came from. So you end up scrambling after the carrot dangling on the end of the stick, like the donkey chasing the carrot that's held in front of it. And what you end up doing is always anticipating, always looking for more. If you get one thing, then you think, well, is there another one? See? That's the way your whole life becomes. And then you become tense and nervous and on edge. See? The fallen ego is hungry. And nothing is ever satisfying until you find what truly satisfies. St. Augustine said, our souls were made for thee, he said. Our hearts pant after thee, something like that. And our soul doesn't find rest until it finds rest in thee. Well, he was so right about that. But people have robbed you of that. And the way they did it was by challenging you, teasing you, pressuring you. And before you know it, you were chasing after something. Some pipe dream, some will-o'-the-wisp notion, some greatness. See, it could have been a coach, teacher, parent. It can be where they challenge you to do more. See, if you're good at something, then what? If you're good, see, then they can't let you just enjoy being good at it. No, you have to start entering competitions, and you have to start aspiring to more and more and more and greater, and win and become big and get a contract and a scholarship, and there's no end to it. And paraded in front of us are all of these are shills. See, shills of this what shall I call it? This, I was going to say entity. This way of life, this worldview, this world order that has you endlessly striving. So they can do it that way. Or the other way they can do it is to put you down and say that, you're no good. And then that tempts you to try harder. See? Or they can say that someone else says you're no good. Someone else says you're inferior. And then that tempts you to try harder too. See? So what they do is they turn you into animals chasing after something. Well, the more you chase, the more you want it. You know, after you've invested years in school, acquired many loans, thousands of dollars in loans, or after you've disgraced yourself, see, after you've denied what you know in your heart in order to get some perk that they dangle in front of you, then the more you do that, the more you want to get what they had promised you. And you may or may not get it. See, they can do it either way. They can give it to you, and then you think, well, there's got to be more. Now you're hooked. Or they can withhold it, never give you approval. See? Never let you get what they promised you, and then you keep trying more and more to get it. See, you crawl on your hands and knees for it. Eventually you crawl on your hands and knees for approval. See? There are different levels of it. See, some people crawl on their hands and knees for someone just to tell them that they look nice. And other people crawl on their hands and knees for a promotion. And others crawl on their hands and knees for who knows what. See? So, you see how these people are missing the present. But then the other thing that happens is that the more you do that, the more you don't want to sit in the present. Because if you were to sit quietly in the present and not submit to those thoughts and that programming that has entered from the outside, were you to sit quietly, you'd begin to feel nervous and antsy. You'd begin to feel anxious because your conscience would begin to catch up with you, what you left behind, what you've been running from. And the more you run from it, and the more you reach to the world, the guiltier you become. So you can't bear sitting still for your conscience. So then you crave more goals, more promises, more schemes, more chasing. And then eventually you get so sick and drained and tense and nervous from all of your straining, goal setting, struggling and striving, that then you begin to have health issues, and then your goal becomes to get well, to get rid of the symptoms. And then they keep you chasing after things in that regard also. And then when you become guilty enough, then you think, well, I've got to get religion. So you go to some organized group. See, and then they make promises too, don't they? For which you have to study. You have to join, you have to study. You make them your master. Because if you do what they say, then you'll get what they promise, but they can't deliver. Because they haven't found it either. For the most part. There are a few exceptions. For the most part, they don't have it. They may be well-meaning, they may not. But they can't deliver. So, now do you see what I mean? And then, when you're tired of chasing after things and struggling and striving ambitiously, hastily, hurriedly, but that becomes a way of life. You see people rushing. There's one lady, in the morning I sit quietly to do a little studying, a little bit of reading. Not study exactly, but a little bit of reading. And then when something is, then I do a little bit of writing. But I see people come in, and there's one lady, she comes rushing in, rushing. She's always rushing. And another lady is also rushing. Rushing, rushing, rushing. See, that person will drive whoever she's married to distraction. Well, that's the way we become. See, we can't sit still. So, what I was going to say is eventually when you become guilty enough, eventually when the thought of doing some more striving and struggling and hurrying, see, you become drained. Gradually you begin to lose your life force, become drained from all of that. And then it's painful to do more. See, plus you acquire more guilt, so you become afraid of it. You actually become afraid of success. Then you seek failure, but failure, It's just failure is just another variation of the striving for success or being pressured, falling for pressure. See, one person is pressured and then they conform and then they try to win, to succeed, to do better and more for whoever's pressuring them. The other person resents it and rebels, and then they can't perform. They go the other way. They end up with learning blocks and so on. But they're still trapped. And they see that they're a failure. See, you're either a successful failure or a failure. You haven't found your own life. You haven't found the reason for your existence. So eventually, when you're afraid to reach for anything anymore, then what do? You look for something to help keep you from reality. So you watch television, you get lost in television, lost in movies, lost in crossword puzzles, lost in video gaming, lost in music, lost in trivia, lost in some mindless hobby or something, endlessly looking for something to take you away from reality. Okay? Sometimes with the help of drugs and alcohol and marijuana. So now you see that most people spend most of their time lost between their own two ears. Then when they reach the end of life and there's nothing more in the future, then eventually we turn to trivial things. See, when you realize you're not going to be great and wonderful and glorious and so on, and you have so much guilt for having tried to manipulate people, try to make things turn out the way you want, manipulate your kids, manipulate your husband. Then when you end up divorced and your kids are in jail, see, not doing so good. You have so much guilt. You can't bear sitting in the present. So then what do? Well, then you just reach for any little thing. You plan what do you have for dinner, or you plan what program you're going to watch on television, or you see, it's just always something, reaching instead of sitting quietly. So now do you see that someone like John of the Cross, or Teresa of Avila, or Brother Lawrence, or Miguel de Molinos, see, people like that, they found reality. Reality is where the birds are singing and the sky is blue and clouds are puffy. And it's where God is. God is in reality. And our souls, I wish I had the quote in front of me. It's so beautiful from St. Augustine. That our souls won't find rest until we find rest in Him. And where do you find Him? In reality. Okay? So these people, they had some very good things to say. I was going to read you some of what they had to say. I'm making a little book of quotations, apt, relevant quotations to the process of coming back to reality. Okay. But the thing is that they're so beautiful. What they say is so nice, but it more like confirms. See, for me, it confirms what I already have experienced. See, confirms. I say, oh yes, I can see that they get it. See, some people don't get it. Some people don't have it. Some people talk about it very, very, very cleverly. Some people mouth the right words, but they haven't really experienced it. See, it's like the sun. You could write scientific treatises about the sun, but unless you've actually experienced the warmth, light and warmth of the sun, you see what I mean? You see the difference? So we also acquire guilt for saying that we have something that we haven't. See, you go and join these groups, and then they try to make you claim that you have something that you haven't really got yet. And that makes you guilty. It makes you fear the real thing. See the real thing. See, let me see if I can give you an example. Little child. Okay. Parent says, did you take the letter over to Aunt Mary like I asked you to? And the little child didn't do it. She started playing with her friends and totally forgot. And the little child says, yes, I did it, but she's lying, okay? She doesn't want to admit that she didn't do it. Oh, that's very good. Thank you for taking the letter over to Mary, Aunt Mary. And then at dinner time, they're sitting at the dinner table, and Mom says to Dad about the little girl, Caitlin, let's say her name is Caitlin. Caitlin took the letter over to Aunt Mary. Wasn't that nice? Wasn't that responsible of her? And Dad said, yeah, it sure was. And Caitlin sits there and she's getting praise for something she didn't do. She should have admitted right away that she didn't do it. So now she's acquired a huge guilt. Well, I won't elaborate on the story anymore, but you see what now she didn't do what she was supposed to. She's afraid to mention it. She doesn't want to admit that she didn't really do it. Well, a lot of people, they claim to have something and they don't really have it. And so they acquire a guilt for that. But it blocks them from the real thing. So what is the real thing? The real thing, what is the real thing in that case? The real thing is to sit quietly and then admit in your heart, yeah, I've been faking it. I don't really know. I don't really have it. I'd like to have it, but I don't. See? You admit that in your heart. And then what? Then you are blessed if you feel bad about it. You feel bad about your fakery, your deceit, your pretense. That's what it is, really. It's pretense. You feel bad. You feel bad. Okay? In front of your conscience, before your conscience. In the same way that the little girl Caitlin, Mommy, I didn't take the letter over to Aunt Mary like you said. I lied. I'm sorry, Mommy. See, she feels bad. Well, you know something? I knew you didn't. I found out after dinner. I found out. I called Aunt Mary and she said she didn't get the letter, so I knew you hadn't. Okay? I'm sorry, Mommy. Well, that's all right. Next time if you do, and if you forget, then you just tell the truth and say, I forgot, okay? Okay, Mommy. See, that's the real thing. So where do you find the real religious experience? You find it in the moment. And your first touch with reality is undoubtedly if you let your conscience catch up with you, and you sit there and all of a sudden you realize that you've been a fraud, or that you've been hateful toward people, resentful, or whatever it is. You just see it, and you regret what you see, and you realize you can't change yourself. And you know that realization is also in God's light. See, in God's light is in reality. His presence is in reality. When your conscience, makes you realize, to see, so it's a quiet sorrow, but when you accept that reality, when you instead of being prideful, when you admit it humbly, and you admit it and accept that reality, then it penetrates deeply, okay, and so that's what they call repentance. But you're being repented in the light. You can't repent yourself. So you see, what you're guilty for is not so much what you did or what you said or what you claimed and it wasn't true, or what you smoked or what you drank, or it's not so much that. What you're really guilty of is denying God His moment, which is your conscience, and you were close to it when you were a little child. When you did something when you were a little child, you felt bad. Well, that was your conscience from God. You were actually close to God. So you need to refine that, that's all. Then when you refine that, see, and then you want more of it. See, it's a sad glad. You're sad to see your own wrong, but you're glad to come clean. See? It's beautiful. Then you can meditate with my meditation. What is my meditation? It's just a little technique that helps you it helps you, so you can practice sitting quietly in the present and not lost in the imagination. What could be simpler than that? See? That should be perfectly natural. People like the patriarchs, see, and Moses and Abraham, David, Elijah, Ruth, see, and of course Paul, John, and people like that. They didn't live in their imagination the way people do now. They lived in reality. They were close to God, in God's reality. See? So that's what you need to find. You can do it anywhere. You can be in the middle of downtown. Everything's busy all around you. It does help in the beginning to do it, to go into your, Christ said, to pray, to go into your closet and close the door. So, to be by yourself, because see, what you need to do is to have mental distance to your own imagination and thoughts and all of those things that came from the outside and want to pull you into them, and a little bit of distance to people, places, and things on the outside. Just a little bit of distance. Okay, that's what you need. So you can be a little closer to God. Because when you get pulled into the imagination, you go floating away with your thoughts and your plans and your worries. They can be very distracting, can't they? Even the worries can be very distracting. They're pulling you away from the moment, from reality, from the present. See? So you have to learn how to deal with them, and it's not by struggling. So that's why I made my little meditation, and it's free. I have different versions, but the simplest one, it's like 6 minutes long. It's free. Just a little technique. You learn how to go in a room, close the door, sit in a chair, become aware of your hands, close your eyes, and look at the inside of your eyelids. See the little pattern, the little sparkle of light, the little glow of light on the inside of your eyelids. Just look at that little bit of light, those patterns of light. Just look at them. See, without straining, just look at them, and at the same time be aware of your hands, so your hands begin to be a little bit warm, a little bit tingly. That's what the little meditation is. You may, as you're listening to this now, you may feel a little bit of it right now as I say it. It's what you need to find a warmth. It's like an embrace, a spiritual embrace from God. See, who rewards you for sitting quietly and for, in your heart, wanting to know the truth. See, being willing to admit the truth. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Now, let me read you something. Let's see if I can find something. I promised you I would read you something, so let's see what I got here. I had something prepared. Okay, this is John of the Cross. Some of you are familiar with the John of the Cross, or St. John of the Cross. He wrote a poem called Dark Night of the Soul. I'm sure you've heard of it. But he did something, in my opinion, that's even better, and I just found out about it. He wrote a book called Dark Night, where he gives commentary on the poem. And what's the poem about? It's about the person who comes to God, the process of coming back to God. Okay, and in his commentary, in his book called The Dark Night, St. John says, he's talking about this infusion of understanding from God. See, that's one of the wonderful benefits of sitting in the present moment, of practicing a little meditation, which helps you to do that. See, now if you were to sit quietly without some little structure, you would probably get lost in your imagination, or you would reach for your iPhone, or something would distract you. Probably, most likely your imagination would, and you'd go floating away with thinking about something. But if you can practice getting a little distance so you can observe thought without being lost in it, if you practice that every morning, like 3 times a day, basically. So you start to practice that. Well, then you'll start to have more and more ability to be in the present and not lost in thinking or lost in something. And then you will begin to realize things and understand things where you don't even know how you understand or how you came to understand, but you just do. See, you'll realize realizations. First, some of them are negative. You'll realize that you've been resentful toward your partner, let's say, or you realize that you've been impatient with your child, or you realize that you've been phony with someone. You know, those types of things. Well, those are truths. They're not very big truths, and they're not pretty truths, and they're not shining truths, but they're truths that you need to see. So you see those and bear a little bit of pain. It's mostly pain to your ego that always wanted to be right and never wrong, so now you have to be a little humbled by it. But you'll also begin to see you begin to realize things. See, you'll see that people are lost sheep and they can't help themselves. Then you won't resent them, see, so much, for example. Or you'll realize that, I'm just saying something, you'll realize that the sun, the earthly sun, is just like God's light in the spiritual realm. The earthly sun gives light and warmth, okay? And God's light gives light, in other words, gives understanding, and also gives warmth, love. So God's light has both light and love in it, truth and love. Truth and love. And you'll see that just the way the plant, just the way the plant loves the light, yearns for the light, and then receives the light and it penetrates. See? And then the plant uses the light then to produce wonderful things in fruit and flowers. Okay? In the same way, the soul, in God's light, receives the light, and then the light produces realizations and insights and begins to change you, see? To become a creature of the light, just like the rose is a creature of the light and the redwood tree is. So you'll see something like that. You'll just see it. In a lightning flash, you'll just see it, okay? You'll see in a lightning flash what you studying for 10 years wouldn't have gotten you. So, St. John of the Cross, St. John says, because this interior wisdom is so simple, general, and spiritual, that it enters not into the understanding under any form or image subject to sense, as is sometimes the case, the imagination, therefore, and the senses. So it has not entered in by them, nor is modified by them, cannot account for it, nor form any conception of it so as to speak in any degree correctly about it, though the soul be distinctly conscious that it feels and tastes this sweet and strange wisdom. So, like I said, you simply realize something in God's light. And realizing it, you don't even know how you realized it, but you just do. You see it clearly, okay? And it didn't come through imagination, didn't come through the senses. See, it didn't come by study or by intellectual machinations. It's something, it entered interiorly, without image, without images. And yet the soul senses that it's conscious, and that it feels and tastes this sweet and strange wisdom. What he's saying is that it's wordless. It's wordless, and you can't make it happen. Okay? Let's see if I can find something else to read to you about this. Living in reality. Teresa of Avila, in her book, The Interior Castle, says, I think I never put this matter so clearly before. To seek God within ourselves avails us far more than to look for him amongst creatures. St. Augustine tells us how he found the Almighty within his own soul after having long sought for him elsewhere. She's talking about recollection, the process of sitting quietly and pulling within yourself, separating so that you have a little mental distance from thought. So the thought, you see the thought. It's not a question of trying to blank thought. You see the thoughts, but you don't fall into them. It's that simple. It's like sitting on the bank of a river. You see the river flowing by, but you don't fall into it. Now what you do is you fall into your thoughts, and you drift away with your thoughts and drift away with your imagination. She says this recollection helps us greatly when God bestows it upon us. In other words, it's a gift. See, all you can do is sit quietly and yearn, see, for, you don't even know what you're yearning for. And be willing to know the truth. See? And if you should know the truth, even if it's something negative about you, to be willing to you want to know it. You're willing to know it. See? And then it becomes a gift to you. It's not something you can make happen. She says, but do not fancy that you can gain it by thinking of God dwelling within you or by imagining him as present in your soul. This is a good practice in the next. For it is founded on the fact that God resides within us. Well, what she means is, it's a good practice. What she means is that recollection. The business of sitting quietly, as I said. Sitting quietly, becoming aware of your hands, closing your eyes, looking at the inside of your eyelids, observing little patterns of light, little glow of light on the inside of your eyelids. It's a good practice, okay? Because that is how you become still. Passive. Passive not in the sense of lackluster being a bump on a log. Not that. But passive, in other words, receiving. And so you just sit quietly. And your soul receives, it doesn't know how, something, some spiritual essence, some sparkles of God's light, okay, enter. And then you go out in the world and you carry it with you. So I think I've hopefully shed a little bit of light on the process. See, it's only later that I talk about it. See, first you experience it in your innermost being by simply being willing to sit quietly and do as I said, not for the purpose of feeling better or being better or looking better but just for the sheer joy of being able to set aside your striving and your pride and your resentment, and to become like a little child again in God's light. See?